Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with you today. As NG mentioned, 17 years ago, I was on this campus when MSA West was founded, and I served as a founding delegate at MSC. And it's amazing to see the growth of MSA West over the last 17 years, the fact that it's still vibrant and viable, and a really important avenue for young Muslims on the West Coast to organize, to get to know one another, and to develop leadership. So to be able to present at a main session, even if it is the hangover session, is an honor and a privilege. The topic that I was given is Think Outside the Mosque. But if you read the description in the program, it's more about reconciling differences, disagreements, and having various approaches to Muslim institutions as young people, as young Muslims, compared to older generations and some of the pioneers that established these institutions for us. So if you could go to the next slide. An overview of the presentation is as follows. I'd like to discuss some of the variables that influence Muslim identity, the types of Muslim institutions, some of which are represented in the back of the room here, the measures that you can use to evaluate the success of Muslim institutions, how to identify their shortcomings and ways to make them better. And then the uncomfortable part of the presentation will be defining respectability politics and how they play out in Muslim communities in the US. And then the happy closure, as my wife recommended that I create in the presentation, is respectful disagreement. Next slide. We all learn from a very young age that we're a single Muslim ummah, and that we're a single body, and when one part of the body hurts, the rest of the body feels the pain. And I'd like to expand on that. I think that there isn't a single way to identify as a Muslim. There isn't a single way to be a Muslim. Now, people may disagree with that, but the reality of the situation is that there are a myriad of ways that self-identifying Muslims characterize themselves. There's practicing and non-practicing. Now, that might bother some folks. Like, what is a non-practicing Muslim? In order to be a Muslim, you have to be practicing Islam. That may be your opinion, but there are plenty of people that I know personally that say, I'm culturally Muslim, meaning they may or may not go to Jummah, they may or may not pray, they may or may not fast during the month of Ramadan. For the person that's signing, should I slow down? Okay. Sorry, I wanted to make sure that everyone in the audience can follow along. And so we have to be cognizant of this. We need to be aware of the fact that people are on their own spiritual journey, and they may be on different parts of the path. They may be on a different path than you're on, but they're all heading towards the same aspiration and goal, which is to better themselves. And you have to lift them up and bring them with you as opposed to push them down. There's the obvious, the Sunni, the Shia, the immigrant, the indigenous or convert. I use indigenous to refer to Black American Muslims, white Muslims, Latino Muslims. And then we have to understand that people say, you know, I have a mixed culture marriage. I'm South Asian, my wife is Arab. And both sides of the family, when we were getting married, well, in Islam, we do it this way. No, that's how you do it in Egypt. Or in Islam, we do it this way. No, that's actually how you do it in Punjab, in Pakistan. So it's very specific, and people conflate culture and religion as the same thing. And it can be a problem, and it can create divisions. So we need to be cognizant of this. Gender is an obvious form of identity that definitely informs the way that you practice Islam. So for the Muslim men in the room, some of you may or may not look outwardly Muslim. But for the sisters that wear hijab, it's immediately apparent to everyone in the society precisely what religion you follow. And you, whether you're thinking about your finals that day, a paper that you have due, the fact that you're late to class, you're not focused on the fact that you're a hijabi Muslim in that particular moment, but someone that sees you, they couldn't possibly care less about what you're dealing with. They immediately identify you as a Muslim. And some of them may or may not engage you in that. So, I mean, my sister had this experience last week. She works for the city of LA. She was in City Hall. She gets in the elevator, and she's freaked out about a deadline that she has at work. And someone asks her, well, what do you think about the murder of the cartoonist in Paris? And she wasn't on. She wasn't thinking about that. She was thinking about her job. But by virtue of the fact that she wears hijab, that was the first thing that she had to deal with when she got into the elevator at work. And Muslim men, we don't necessarily have to deal with that. So this informs our identity and how we perceive ourselves as Muslim. Then my favorite and least favorite terms, liberal, conservative, progressive. These terms, to me, just like moderate, mean everything and nothing at the exact same time. they're almost utterly meaningless. Moderate to me means keeping your mouth shut. A moderate Muslim is one that doesn't speak up. A moderate Muslim is the one that practices Islam in private and doesn't say anything publicly with other Muslims or with other non-Muslims. Now, there's different interpretations, and that's precisely what I mean. The word doesn't mean anything. Leftist. I don't know what that means. Like, these terms are malleable. They can take different shape, and they're politically motivated. And they can be used as weapons, or they can be used as tools to identify ourselves with a particular ideology or approach. And then that's the last point. Self-identification. Nobody in this room can claim that someone else is not a Muslim, and I can't claim that any of you are not Muslim. It's our own right and our ability to identify as Muslims however we see fit. Now, does that mean that, if you see... So I'll give you a very specific example. I had a friend at USC who was on the track team. We were in architecture together before we both dropped out. And he used to come to my MSU meetings. He wasn't Muslim. He was raised Baptist. He went to a Jesuit private school, and then he came to USC, which is formerly Methodist. And he said, I really would love to be Muslim. But the problem is that I can't give up pork, I can't give up alcohol, and I can't give up dating women. And this is what I told him, and this was very unpopular at the time. You could just be a bad Muslim. You could convert to Islam, not give up pork, not give up alcohol, not give up dating, and understand in your heart that that's not what Islam allows, and grow as a human being. I don't expect you to go 0 to 100 real quick. So, you need to, everyone is in a process of growth. To expect perfection, to expect the ultimate of what it means to realize the identity as a Muslim or to strive to be a mu'min is unrealistic, it's unattainable, and it can be daunting. And it forces people away from the religion. It makes people not want to be Muslim at all. And we can play a role in pushing people away as much as we can play a role in bringing them towards us. Next slide. Representative types of Muslim institutions. Islamic primary schools, K through 12, masaajid, youth groups, educational institutes, Al-Maghrib, Institute of Knowledge, which has a booth back there, advocacy organizations like ISNA and MPAC, civil rights organizations like CARE and Muslim Advocates, social organizations like MIPsters, Muppies, and Ill Muslims. I didn't come up with the names. MSA and MSUs, networking organizations like CAMP, community organizations like Ilm Foundation and Iman, social service organizations like NISWA. NISWA is one of my favorite Muslim organizations in Los Angeles. If you're not familiar with them, please familiarize yourself with them. They provide social services to victims of abuse, specifically Muslim women and children. And it's not something that people like to talk about, but it's an issue that is impacting a huge cross-section of Muslim families in the United States, and it's something that we need to address dead on, and they've been doing it here in Los Angeles. Ummah Free Clinic, obviously affiliated with UCLA. A unique one that's more recent is crowdfunding, similar to Kickstarter. It's called Launch Good, and it's a Muslim version of Kickstarter, and even journalistic outlets like the Islamic Monthly. So these are the range of Islamic institutions. This list is by no means all-inclusive. There's definitely more, but I wanted to put these out there and then provide criteria to evaluate them that are universal. Next slide. One thing that the organizers of this conference specifically asked me to discuss was inclusivity. And I'd like to talk about inclusivity through a very particular lens, social justice. Gender parity, in which this room has no gender parity. This room is dominated by dedicated Muslim women that grossly outnumber the number of dedicated Muslim men. I see a bunch of dudes not clapping. You're going to have to get used to this unless you get some of your friends to roll out. So, and this is important, because now it's not about including women. It's about women having to include men. And so if in a couple of years you see Muslim organizations that have boards and executive directors that are comprised exclusively of women, it's not going to be a response to patriarchy. It's actually going to be a tangible change that Muslim women are more apt, more committed, and more prepared for Muslim leadership than Muslim men. A few more Muslim men were hesitantly clapping. And this is an organic process. And I don't think that this is good or bad. This just is. And I think it's something that needs to be acknowledged. I gave this exact same hangover keynote session to MSA West Conference ago at UC Santa Barbara, and it was the same thing. I was an instructor in the Muslim Game Changers Network, which is a social justice Sunday school program that was launched by CARE in Southern California. There was 60 participants, and only 8 of the participants were guys, and I think all 8 of them are here today, or at least I saw a few of them. So, I mean, you could see this as a problem, or you could just see this as a transition and a reality that we need to acknowledge. So, I start with gender parity because this room doesn't have an issue with it. And there's other Muslim organizations that do have an issue with it, and it needs to be addressed. Ethnic diversity. Immigrant Muslims, or the sons and daughters of immigrant Muslims, dominate leadership positions in Muslim institutions and organizations. And these immigrant Muslims tend to be upwardly mobile, represent the socioeconomic elite, enjoy a great deal of educational privilege, and in some instances enjoy racial privilege by passing as white or adopting whiteness. And this happens, quite frankly, at the expense of black convert Muslims, of Latino convert Muslims. It doesn't happen at the expense of white convert Muslims, and I think we can understand why that is. So this is something, when I talk about ethnic diversity, I'm over, well, we shouldn't have all Pakistani organizations and all Arab organizations. If that needs to be said, then we're regressing as a people. I mean, that's a foregone conclusion. We know that that's not the issue. But what we do need to do is not just include African American or Latino brothers and sisters that are a part of the Muslim community. They need to be put up into leadership positions because they represent anywhere between 25 to 30% of the total Muslim population in the United States. So we can't have token positions for them. We can't have token inclusion. We need to have substantive inclusion and integration into our Muslim institutions. This next one does pertain to every single person in this room, which is intergenerational representation. Why isn't there a youth representative on the Islamic Shura Council of Southern California? Why doesn't every single masjid board have a youth representative on the board? People keep talking about the unmosqued, how mosques are out of touch with younger generations. So the solution to that is to not include young people in a leadership position? How does that make any sense? If we want to create spaces that are more inclusionary and more welcoming to young people, then we need to hold them accountable and responsible and empower them by putting them in a leadership position in order to make these spaces more inclusive. Religious diversity. Seems odd that a Muslim speaking to a Muslim audience at a Muslim conference would be talking about religious diversity. But based on our Muslim identity, we know that there's more than one way that people approach Islam. There's more than one way that people practice Islam. And that's what I mean by religious diversity. We are so caught up in interfaith. We will talk to Christians, Jews, Mormons that vehemently disagree with our beliefs, and we will show them the utmost deference and respect. And we should. But do we show the same deference and respect to other Muslims that we disagree with? Do we show the same deference and respect within Sunni Shia disagreements? Even within Sunni, between madhab, anti-madhab, Salafi, non-Salafi, Sufi, non-Sufi? Are we as tolerant within the Muslim community of divergent opinions as we are with our interfaith non-Muslim partners? And I would unequivocally say no. And I think that's a problem. If we're willing to respect a person that defies the validity of our Rasul, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, more so than someone that loves the Rasul slightly differently than we do, we have a problem. And we don't understand our own religion. If we can accommodate religious diversity outside of Islam, we certainly need to focus on including and addressing religious diversity within Islam. And then finally, thinking of the majority. We are not the majority. We as Muslims are not the majority. We as people that have access to higher education are not the majority. Those of us that are middle class or upper class and have socioeconomic privileges do not represent the majority. The majority of people in this country, the majority of people in this city, the majority of people in this world are working class and impoverished. And that's a fact. That's a quantified fact. And we need to be thinking of them as much as we're thinking of ourselves in the decisions that we make in leadership positions and in the way that we build and engage Muslim institutions. Next slide. This slide has a lot of bullets, so I have, I beg your indulgence. I'm going to try to go through all of them as quickly as I can. Qualified leadership. If someone is in a leadership position, that does not necessarily mean they are qualified. They just have a leadership position. Qualified leadership means having the educational, the professional, and the spiritual experience and fortitude to do your job. Every single person in this room has the capability of being a qualified leader within a Muslim institution. Don't sell yourselves short because of your age. Don't sell yourselves short because of your gender, your ethnicity, or the number of years that you've been on this planet engaging Muslims. Every single person in this room has something to contribute. A clearly defined mission. A problem with a lot of nonprofits, and Muslim nonprofits are also victim to this, is that they want to do everything and they want to do it good enough instead of having a narrow mission and a narrow focus and doing something incredibly well. So there's mission creep. Focused mission is important. Efficient logistics. The fact that we started 3 minutes late at a Muslim conference is impeccable. I mean, that doesn't happen. So kudos to the organizers and to MSA West for making that happen. But efficiency in logistics is important. Managerial structures, financial structures, and that's the next point. Financial stability. How many of you hate Muslim fundraisers as much as I hate Muslim fundraisers? I don't know about you guys, but when I get embarrassed for someone, it's something that physically permeates my body. I physically feel embarrassed, and there's nothing more excruciating to me than a 45-minute shaming to give a Muslim organization money. Now, I know that it's necessary, and I know that a lot of Muslim organizations and institutions would fall apart without this shaming of fundraising, but that's because we have a focus on short-term financial stability and no focus whatsoever on long-term financial stability. We don't have endowments, and we need endowments. We need to be focused on the work and not on fundraising. Define constituency. I get particularly frustrated when I see a press release from a Muslim organization that says, on behalf of Muslims in America, or on behalf of Muslim Americans, and they say something that I am diametrically opposed to. There is not a single solitary Muslim organization in the United States of America that represents all or potentially even most Muslims. Think about that. So there is definitely an attempt to say that we speak for the majority or we speak for most Muslims. But there is no quantitative evidence to substantiate those claims. And quite frankly, the more and more these statements are released, the less and less they speak for me personally. So it's important to say that MSA West has a defined constituency. That constituency is defined by the chapters of MSUs and MSAs at particular campuses that have signed on and believe in the charter of MSA West, the constitution of MSA West. Then beyond that, you have to trickle down to the campus level. The members that self-identify with that MSA or MSU, accept the fact that MSU and MSA at their campuses joined MSA West, are then members of MSA West. Does that mean that every Muslim university student is represented by that MSU or by MSA West? Absolutely not. There's some that would reject that notion entirely. And we need to be accommodating that and understand that we have limits to our constituency. And the reason that's important is because these institutions should exist because of a clear mandate from their defined constituencies. They shouldn't exist because 3 dudes got together and wanted to create an organization. They should exist because there was a need for the organization, there was a defined constituency, and the constituency said, yes, we need you to advocate for us. Standards and rubrics. How do we know if our Muslim institutions are succeeding if we don't know what to measure them against? Is it how many press releases they put out? Is it how many times they condemned ISIS on our behalf? Should we have a tally? If you hit 100, you get a door prize? Like, I don't know what it is. So, existing for the sake of existing, not necessarily having a defined constituency, having a broad mission statement without any focus, and no standard or rubrics for evaluation, these are all measures of ineffectiveness. Transparency, financial, political, and managerial. Who runs you? Where do you get your money from? How do you make your decisions? As someone that studied public policy, if I don't know the financials of a Muslim organization, and I see them making questionable decisions, the first question I have is who is their major donor? Who gives them the majority of their money? And that is who their constituent is. So if I see them kowtowing to specific ideologies or political aspirations in the media or out in public, I have to think to myself, why are they doing that? You don't bite the hand that feeds you, so you basically are bowing to your donors. Accountability, internal and external. Internal accountability, if you're the executive director, you need to be accountable to your staff below you, and you need to be accountable to your board above you. And if there's not clear demarcations of how accountability is issued and maintained, that's a problem. External accountability. I'll give USC as an example. I'm listed as the creator of the 501c3 nonprofit status for the IRS for both the Muslim Student Union and the Ansar Service Partnership. So I have the distinct honor and privilege of facilitating the audits. That's external accountability. Long-term vision and plan. If you're focused on making yourself relevant for the next 12 months and fundraising for the next 12 months, you have no long-term vision. What are you trying to achieve in 5, 10, 15, 20 years? And the fact that MSA West is hosting its 17th annual conference, and there was hundreds of people that were here 17 years ago that founded it, not just me, our vision was long-term. We didn't want MSA West to fizzle out in 5 years. We wanted to see it grow and to have it be here today. Strong allies, Muslim and non-Muslim. Do people consider you or that institution strong allies? And if so, why? And if you can't get strong allies, how are you being effective? Consistency. You denounce one thing last week, you don't denounce it next week, you think you're somewhere in the middle the week after that, you're not going to be taken seriously or be credible, and you won't remain relevant. And the best measure of effectiveness is if people come to you, Muslim and non-Muslim, and say, this institution is an example of how to create new institutions. We want to follow your structure. We want to mold our organization around your organization. And that is the ultimate measure of effectiveness. Next slide. Improving our institutions. Everyone has something positive to contribute. Offer ideas, time, services, and skills to Muslim institutions because they need it. Consciously build upon your own experience to become a leader. Identify weaknesses, present critiques, and strategize potential solutions. Next slide. All right, this is where it gets fun. Critiques. Intentions. Intentions are tricky. Someone can punch you in the face, and then they'll say, I don't want you to get mad at me. I had really good intentions for punching you in the face. Are you going to be really mad at them? Obviously. So intentions can be used as a weapon. And remember that. When I talk about intentions, I only talk about myself, because I'm only capable of evaluating my own intentions. I can't look into any one of your hearts and know what your intention is when you do or say or don't say anything. So if you yourself as an individual want to make a critique, you have to be clear on your intention in doing so. Are you doing this to create discontent, or are you doing this to improve a situation? And if you're doing it to create discontent, stop. Be honest with yourself and don't do it. If you truly want to improve people, improve communities, and improve institutions, move forward. What voice are you going to use? Are you speaking as an individual? Are you speaking on behalf of an organization? Or are you speaking on behalf of more than one person, but a part of an undefined collective? I know I'm not the only Muslim that thinks this way, but I don't have an organization behind me whose behalf I'm speaking on. But I know that I'm speaking for more than one person. Clear critiques. Don't connect to disconnected issues, don't ramble, and don't make ad hominem attacks. Don't attack people, attack ideas. Make people rigorously defend their ideas and the reasons behind why they do what they do. Be clear on what you want the intended outcome to be. What are you trying to get by raising the critique? How would you measure the change? How would you measure the responsiveness? And in order to do that, you need to understand the range of anticipated outcomes. Someone could slap you for giving the critique. Someone could accuse you of creating fitna. Someone could accuse you of showing poor adab. And you need to weigh and levy these concepts and ideas that this may occur. Consistency. Don't critique in one way, and then accept it in another way, or don't critique one organization that's doing precisely what another organization is doing, but because you have personal friendships or relationships, you're only going to critique the organization that you hate. Measures of success. If you critique, understand how your critiques are successful or unsuccessful. And falling on deaf ears. I critique a lot, for those of you that know me. And a lot of times it falls on deaf ears. And that does not stop me. That does not deter me. That does not discourage me. I just keep doing it. Next slide. Respectability politics. What are they? Individual members of minority or disenfranchised groups regulate other members of the same group for not being focused on assimilating with the dominant normative perspective. This approach is utilized instead of addressing the fact that the dominant normative perspective fails to accommodate diversity or differences in minority or in the disenfranchised group. Here's a very general example. A person of color saying that people of color are poor because they are lazy, not because there are institutional barriers in place that keep certain groups of people in a state of poverty by depriving them access to privileges that would allow them to be middle class or wealthy. Now, you have to understand respectability politics in order to understand Muslim institutions, because many Muslim institutions are playing this game. And if you want your critiques to be informed and to be effective, you need to understand where they're going with this. All right, I need to speed up a little bit. Here's a very specific example. Radicalization and CVE. How many of you know what CVE stands for? You will soon, because you are the target of countering violent extremism. Young Muslims are said to be at the highest risk of radicalization, and you will be the targets of CVE strategies. So here's the claim. Muslims are prone to radicalization, and it is an issue in the U.S. that must be proactively addressed. Here's the response from Muslim institutions that are succumbing to respectability politics. Muslims must develop and deploy countering violent extremism programs within the Muslim community in the U.S. to address radicalization. Based on my mocking tone, I think you understand that I believe this is complete crap. Here's why. The reality is, the next slide. According to the Pew Research Center, there were 2.6 million Muslims living in the United States in 2010. According to Professor John Mueller of Ohio State University, only 53 individuals have been arrested for potential acts of terrorism associated with Al-Qaeda in the U.S. from 2001 to 2012, an 11-year span. On average, that is 5 arrests per year over an 11-year span. Think about that. 2.6 million Muslims in the country, and only 5 of them are arrested per year for potentially committing a terrorist act affiliated with Al-Qaeda. Interestingly enough, Professor Mueller's study also reveals that 49% of these post-9/11 terrorism arrests involved a government-paid informant. So half of those 5 people were fake terrorists that were encouraged to become terrorists by the very government that arrested them. Those 5 individuals on average arrested per year represent 0.0002% of the Muslim population in the United States being radicalized per year. In order to establish a sense of magnitude or a scale of local significance, there were 596 murders in LA County in 2013. So what's the point of this? Fox News, Representative Peter King from New York says that Muslims are being radicalized and Muslim institutions are not doing enough to root out radicalization and to counter violent extremism. Muslim institutions freak out. They get scared. They play into the false narrative, and they develop national counter-violent extremism programs to appease these people that are fear-mongering about Muslims. But if you look at the quantitative facts about violent extremism in the United States, you're looking for a needle in a haystack. You're asking Muslim institutions to vet through 2.6 million Muslims and find 5 people per year. Something that is likely physically impossible to do. Why do we do this? We need to critique this. But before you critique it, in this example, you have to understand three important components. Understand the dominant narrative being projected about Muslims that needs to be addressed. Evaluate the manner in which Muslim leaders and institutions may be using respectability politics in addressing the dominant narrative being projected about Muslims. Inform yourself of the reality they may not be in line with the dominant narrative being projected, nor the Muslim response. Use all three components to generate an informed critique so that it is most effective. Sorry, can you advance? Oh, that data should have been advanced, my bad. Can you advance one more? One more? Respectful disagreement. If and when you disagree with leaders and institutions, or if you try to hold them accountable, you may be accused of being disrespectful. Disagreement is not disrespect. Critiques are not personal, nor should they be. Identifying problems is not undermining our leaders, organizations, or pioneers. It is helping them grow, evolve, and become more responsive. We all have an obligation to contribute what we can to make our institutions better. Last slide. Chapter 6, verse 125. Invite all to the way of your Lord with wisdom and beautiful preaching, and argue with them in ways that are best and most gracious. Your Lord knows best who have strayed from his path and who receive guidance. If you have any questions or have any disagreements with what I've said, I'm completely open, because I think that I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm not set in my ways, and I need to be adaptable in the same way that I encourage others. So please reach out to me. You can reach out to me here, or you can email me. My email address is very simple. It's alimir, ALIMIR, @usc.edu. Thank you so much for your time.